Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Out and About. Today we have a program on Hughes Aircraft history. We're at the historical Culver City facility for a retirees reception in the building where the Spruce Goose was built. We'll be interviewing some of the Hughes retirees who helped create the magic that was Hughes Aircraft. Let's go in and enjoy the event.
My name is Linda Dishman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Conservancy. And welcome, everybody, to the Hughes Aircraft Company, although all of you are really doing the welcoming to all of us. As many of you know, the Los Angeles Conservancy is doing a tour of the property on Sunday, and we've had 750 people sign up. I think some of you probably are going to be on our tour. And we're very excited about the opportunity to be able to showcase not only the great architecture of this campus, but to really tell the story of Hughes Aircraft Company. And it's really the story of all of you. So many of you have been very helpful in developing the history that we're going to be telling everybody about on Sunday. And we've been very fortunate to have the real story of working here and building all of the helicopters and the Spruce Goose and everything. So we have a big thank you to all of you for all that you've done to make the story so rich on the Hughes Aircraft Company site. This has been a site that has had tremendous history. It's languished a little bit in recent years, and one of the reasons that we were so excited when the Rakovich Company took over this property is because we knew what good stewards they would be, that they would understand the great history of this site, that they would respect that history, and they would revitalize these buildings and the property so that they would go on and continue the history of the Hughes legacy here and continue to tell that story. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Wayne Rakovich, the head of the Rakovich Company, who has done such amazing work on the Wiltern Theater, the Oviatt Building, the Fine Arts Building, and so we know that he has the vision and the expertise, and probably most important of all, the passion to do right by the Hughes Aircraft Company property. So please join me in welcoming Wayne Rakovich.
Good afternoon, everyone. And please feel comfortable about sitting down and making yourself comfortable, because you're going to hear in a few minutes from somebody who you all know and who is very much more important than I am, and that's Ken Richardson. So make yourself comfortable. I would first like to introduce your host today, which essentially is our company and some of the key people associated with this project. I'd like you to know my wife, Joanne, who is sitting back here. The chief, let me introduce them all, and then if you still like them, you can give them a hand. The Chief Operating Officer of our company, Claire DeBreer. The Development Manager for this project, our son, Milan Ratkovich. Property Manager for the project, Jeff Herrera. And many of you know Beth Kubasek, who is the Assistant Development Manager for the project, and she helped coordinate this whole event. I am also very delighted to introduce you to Brenda Levin, whose firm Levin & Associates is the architect that is guiding us through this project. So everybody, and Rand, our chief engineer, is over here as well. You guys know something about engineers. So that's the group that's here. Let me take a moment to explain to you what we're going to be doing. We will be restoring, remodeling, bringing back the 11 buildings that remain as part of the historic Hughes Aircraft Company campus. We are real estate developers. That's sort of what we do. We expect that these buildings will be occupied by companies that have the same bent toward creativity that you all had. They will be in the field of entertainment and technology and media. The hangar itself is very likely to continue to be what it has been for the last 5 years, which is a facility for the production of major motion pictures. What used to be the engineering offices will become the production offices associated with films that are being made. For those of you that have had a peek across the way, there's one in progress over there. So that's what we're all about. My principal role when I heard about this event, and it was suggested that my role would be to welcome you here, I was of course happy to do that. But then I thought about it for a moment and I said, wait a second, we've only owned this property for 4 months. This is your home, far more than it is ours. You have made much more history here than we probably ever will. So I'm not necessarily welcoming you, I'm just going to say welcome back, because this is yours. There is a real estate organization that folks in our business belong to. It's the largest real estate organization in the world associated with real estate development. It's called the Urban Land Institute. And the Urban Land Institute had a meeting here in Los Angeles on Wednesday, and I was asked to give a talk to that group. And I would like to read for you just one paragraph out of that talk. This is what we said. We celebrate the remarkable achievements of the people of the Hughes Aircraft Company. They were truly gifted and dedicated people whose stunning accomplishments protected our nation and changed our world for the better. We have every intention of sharing this remarkable history with the future occupants of our development, to be known as the Hercules campus. We will join them in celebrating the vision, the ambition, the daring, the inventiveness, the determination, and the creativity that precedes all of us on this historic site and in the 11 buildings that comprise the Hercules campus. Our intention, ladies and gentlemen, is to make this a very special place. And the history that you have made here will remain here, and it will be celebrated here for a long time to come. I hope that you will come back. Give us a year or so, and this place will look very different than it does today. We expect and hope that it will become a very special place in Los Angeles, both because of its history and because of the quality of the environment that we intend to create. So we welcome you back at any time, and we are so proud to be associated with you and what you have accomplished. Now, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you one of you. You know him already, so Ken Richardson, former president of Hughes Aircraft Company, is here, and I'm delighted to present him back to you. Ken?
Thank you very much, Wayne. You left one word out of that magnificent treatise, teamwork. That's what made us great, a team, and that's what we did together. When we got in trouble, you could find somebody to help you out. We all worked together. So greetings, soulmates and fellow travelers in life. This is a magnificent occasion because of what we're dedicating here. It's a piece of history. Much of history is measured by ancient buildings. Think about the Treasury building in Petra, Jordan, 1300 BC. The Parthenon, Athens, 500 BC. The Colosseum, 80 AD in Rome. Those are all still there. 3 magnificent ones were built in the early 1600s, starting with the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, Constantinople at the time, the Taj Mahal in India, and the Nojiji Shogun Palace in Kyoto. Those are all marvelous places, and they are a mark of history. We have some in this country as well. The ones I would quickly pick are the 21 California missions and Fort Ticonderoga. Now that's opposite, isn't it? Opposite ends of the country. But here we are to celebrate another building, far more youthful than those were, or those are, but it was magic. This was a magic place. Many of you who started here way back can visualize things that happened here. Many of you may have seen them. For example, Howard Hughes used to come in that back door, run up these stairs, go into a small office up there, to avoid confrontations in his formal office in Building 1. I well understand why he must have done that sort of thing. Katharine Hepburn walked right through there and prepared for her flight training with Howard Hughes. Howard himself came up and sat in the cockpit of a Convair 240 and started here, went outside, came back, outside, back all day. He was testing the thrust reversers in these propeller engines because a failure in one of those had caused him his almost fatal crash in the XF-11. He tested them all day, and the only thing he stopped doing was once in a while, one time he stopped, I'm getting dry, and maybe somebody could bring some water. He stopped, had a glass of milk, that's what made me thirsty, and a sandwich, which he had brought from home. Howard Hughes did that. So thank you. Actually, out of the bottle of wine. Now, those of us who are old-timers came here remember some other things. You came in the front entrance past the celery sheds. Why were they called celery sheds? Well, this used to be a farming community. Those were converted to a paint shop in World War II. You can also remember things like flooding. This whole place was built on wetlands, and we celebrated because sometimes it would rain so hard, our bosses would say, go on home because otherwise your cars will be flooded out. But the tragedy of it is, one time, one of our employees got in a Volkswagen, drove out there. Upon reaching Jefferson, there was a flood stream coming by. The Volkswagen actually floated. It went down a storm drain, and we never saw that employee again. That's real tragedy. But this also was a famous place because it's the largest wooden building in the world. That would be contested by the Japanese because there's a place in Nara that might be bigger, used to be burned down. It also, you can see some photographs, is a place where the large flying boat was built. And the photograph that's so amazing, which will be in my book, by the way, you can see the wing, which goes almost the entire span of this hangar right along here with 8 engine nacelles on top. It's an absolutely incredible picture. That was the largest airplane ever built. And by the way, it did fly once. The largest helicopter ever built was also constructed here. I got to see that fly in 1952. Unfortunately, it had some design problems, so it never went into production, and also the war had gotten over with. But why this is such an important place is this is the birthplace of a national treasure. You folks were part of that national treasure. We did some astounding things. This company, after 14 years of having fun building toy airplanes, 4 of them, was converted by Ramo Wooldridge and with the help of the government into the #1 electronics military firm in the world. We started there in 1946, and in 1953, Howard Hughes, in effect, got chucked out, so he didn't have anything to do with us after that. We were donated to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. I'll tell you more about that, which is a marvelous place as well. Now, at that point, 3 excellent managers were hired: Pat Hyland, Alan Puckett, and John Richardson. I always called him the real Richardson, which he was. It was an excellent team. Here's a super manager with technical skills, one of the best technical people in the world, Alan Puckett, and one of the best marketing people ever, the real Richardson. That is a way to meld a management team that we can all follow, and we certainly did. We grew from 0 assets in 1953 to be worth $5.2 billion in 1985 based on our sale to General Motors. That doesn't sound like a big number today, but it was sure a big number then because it's the largest sale of a commercial company in history. We grew from about 15,000 people at that time to 85,000 people, the largest employer in California, the largest employer in Arizona, and we operated in 13 states and 5 other nations. We served 25 nations with our products. We conquered every possible thing in electronics, and we created many firsts. There's not enough time to tell you all of them, but please, when you get the book, you'll find them all in there, well listed and hopefully described in terms that you can understand. Now that was a real accomplishment. We were really something, and we did it through teamwork. Teamwork is what counts. Now, as I say, there are three ways to recount history and commemorate things so that it will always be remembered. One is buildings. I ran through a long list of famous buildings, one of which is 3,000 years old. This building's only 70 years old, but we hope that it will reach the category of those famous buildings of all time. And Ratkovich is going to do an excellent job bringing it back to life. Another way to mark history is artifacts, finding, preserving, and displaying artifacts. Some of our devices are found in many museums around the country, Smithsonian, I'll name, 5 military museums and so forth. There's another big opportunity here which we would like you to participate in. The Western Museum of Flight down in Torrance has been operating for some time and is going to build a new building, hopefully to house Hughes Aircraft Company products. The artifacts that are sometimes located in Raytheon, we hope they will distribute some of them to the museum, and also perhaps in your attic. We don't have any cellars here in California, but look in your cellar anyway to find artifacts that are meaningful in terms of recording the history of this company. There is a sign-up sheet out there, by the way, for those of you who know that you have some. Put your name down, please. And the third way to do it is through written history. With the assistance of 90 superb people, our team members, let's say, from the company, over the last 3.5 years, a book has been composed. It is ready for publication. There are flyers out there to tell you about it and how to order it. This isn't done as a means of making money, because I'm certainly not going to do that. It's a work of love. It's a tribute to you people who, in my opinion, have been unmatched in the world since for teamwork, creativity, a willingness to do tough things, and getting impossible things done. Such a tribute to you. It attempts to talk about the comprehensive diversification we had. As I said, every part of the electromagnetic spectrum we did exploit with great success. And it also talks about the management style that we had that we hoped would stimulate that creativity rather than bottling people up, getting to think outside the box and do something. So it talks about the history of the company, it talks about the technologies we're in, and also the management style. There also are a lot of funny things in there, people stories, some secret, never told before stories about Howard Hughes. Everybody wants to hear about those. Boy, they're pretty racy. So I would recommend highly the book, mostly because I would like to get maximum circulation, not for the money, but to spread the word. We are just not known. Almost everybody knows about Howard Hughes, the eccentric. Nobody knows about what we did. What we did was perhaps masked in security. Perhaps also the label Hughes turned people off. It was a myth. That was both good and bad. It made our work easier to do, but it has made us potentially forgotten, and we don't want that. So, vaya con Dios, mujeres y caballeros.
I'm here with Ken Richardson. Ken, what were the years that you worked for Hughes Aircraft, and what was your role?
I arrived here in 1952 as part of the fellowship program, which was a mechanism the company used to attract people from universities. I started work as a radar design engineer, and over the years I progressed, mostly due to blind luck, and retired as president in 1991.
What's it like to be back here at the Culver City facility?
It was very exciting to see again these facilities. which are designated as a California Historic Site, and the Ratkovich Company is doing an excellent job in bringing them all back to life, all 11 buildings. It also is exciting to see some of the people that we teamed with to do the things that the company did. We were rated really as a national treasure, and to see these people again who were dedicating their hearts to our mission and succeeding in creative technology is a real wonder again, and it makes the heart throb to come back.
It's also exciting to hear some of the Hughes Aircraft artifacts are being collected for a museum.
I think history can be preserved in many ways. One, of course, is preserving these buildings and making them an historic site, as has been done with many other buildings around the world. Another is to find a way to store and display the artifacts. This company actually became the electronics source for aerospace. We had between 1,200 and 12,000 products, depending on how you number them. We conquered every part of the electromagnetic spectrum, so there was nothing we could not do. Many of those things are set world records, and we should restore those artifacts and put them on display. The Western Museum of Flight in Torrance has a plan to build a new building and display many of these artifacts. Some of them are resident in Raytheon Corporation. It's possible they will make a loan of these, and others are actually stored in people's homes, and those are being solicited and will be gathered. I think that's going to be a marvelous display of the artifacts of things that we created.
In your book, Hughes After Howard, you captured the magic that is Hughes Aircraft. Can you talk about that?
As mentioned previously, there are many ways to record history. One is by preserving the buildings, another is displaying the artifacts, and a third is to record the history in writing. With the help of 90 other people and 4 years of effort, this book has been created. And yes, the idea is to capture the magic of what it is that we did. There's very seldom any other way that you can do that.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the environment at Hughes Aircraft that led to these major breakthroughs?
I think we had something that was magic. It was an attitude and a devotion to trying to do something different. Some of that was inspired by Mr. Hughes, because that was his reputation. But as you probably know, in 1953, he essentially disappeared. And by that time, we had gone into electronics. The difficulty of describing what we did is very, very weighty, because we were comprehensive. We did everything that could be done in electronics. Now to portray that in a book is very, very difficult. And how we did it is even more important. What management styles did we invent to assure that these people that we had would still be going in the same direction, but at the same time breaking the barriers that were perceived by other people? In other words, doing new things and inventing things. Our population grew to 85,000 people, largest employer in California, largest in Arizona, operating in 13 states and 5 other countries. We had 22,000 engineers and scientists, of whom 4,000 were PhDs. Where else in the world that gathering of creativity can be found? I don't think so. And so we had a unique set of people, but we had a motivation that I think surmounted many barriers. We had the advantage of private ownership, so we didn't have to satisfy our stockholders with significant things happening every 6 months or every 3 months, because we could have a long-term objective. If we made some money, we could reinvest that in further research and development. Now, one more thing that's difficult to describe is that we more or less perfected the system of program management. Some of our systems are extraordinarily complex. Example, the F-14 system has a radar, an infrared system, set of controls and displays, a missile, set of power supplies, many, many complex things that require different technologies. How do you get all that to come together and function properly. About 3,000 people are required to invent it, and therefore you have to have a unique management style that will maintain that creativity and yet get the end product to function properly and to do it on time and schedule. So we did develop some unique skills in management, and I think we're very effective in our creative workforce.
Could you give us some example how those breakthroughs are affecting our everyday lives today?
Yes, indeed. We did become the #1 military contractor in the world, rated by the entire world in that regard. We also created many marvelous things that are used by civilization today that improve our lifestyles. Let's cite a few of those. One, worldwide communication through satellites. We were the ones that invented and made practical the geosynchronous satellite. And that then turned into something that now can achieve worldwide communications in an instant fashion. We invented the laser. Lasers are used everywhere. Medicine, production of various products. Of course, it's used in entertainment and used in communication. Everybody's heard about fiber optics communication, the most rapid way to communicate any data. That uses lasers. We all know what lasers are, and we enjoy them. Cell phones. There are millions of cell phones throughout the world. The signal processor in each one of those was really the product of what we did. In addition to those things, everybody now knows about DirecTV, was once again using a satellite so that now you can receive 200 television channels directly in your home using a very tiny antenna mounted on the roof. So you're directly looking at that satellite and getting that material relayed to you. I think there are now something over 22 million subscribers to that. So those are some of the things I think that civilians will have benefited from what we did.
Was private ownership helpful in winning secret contracts?
Private ownership indeed was a boon to many of the things we did. And with the name Hughes in front of us, it also helped doing many things that were mysterious and clandestine. So much of the stuff we did over these years related to security or what's called special access required. We were a natural place to do that. Some of these were called black programs, some highly classified programs. There are all kinds of magic names to talk about clandestine work in which we do something extremely secret. You don't want anybody to know what you did. And of course, the reason was that we don't want the enemy to know what our capabilities will become. So yes, it did help a lot. We did win about 80% of the competitions we entered, which I think is rather remarkable. And we were in many, many highly classified programs, some of which cannot be revealed today.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the company?
The purpose of this book, of course, is to record the history of a national treasure, which will otherwise be lost. It began in 1932 under Mr. Hughes and operated for 14 years doing unusual things, mostly in the airplane business. They designed and built 4 different types of airplanes, some of which the largest in the world, one of which was the fastest in the world, and so forth. In 1946, something dramatically different came along. 2 individuals, Dr. Simon Ramo and Dr. Dean Wooldridge, came along with the help of the government and transformed the company into electronics. We were really the original Silicon Valley because we brought electronics into aerospace. Then in 1953, as you've heard, there was a big ruckus. Those 2 gentlemen left because Mr. Hughes was unable to do management properly. The Air Force came in and demanded something different happen, so we were donated to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. By the way, that's a marvelous thing. Its endowment is $15 billion today, and it's doing marvelous medical things. Many people don't know about it. You should find out about that. And incidentally, that's also in this book. But in 1953 then, because of all these stresses, a new management team came in. Pat Hyland, who was an excellent, far-sighted manager, Alan Puckett, who had been with the company and was one of the world's best technical people, and John Richardson, I used to call him the real Richardson, who was the best marketer that we've ever found. Now, there is a composite team that can make something happen. We started with 0 assets in 1953, and by 1985, when the government forced the Medical Institute to sell us to General Motors, we were worth $5.2 billion. That doesn't sound like a lot today, but it certainly was at that time. And, as I think we said before, 85,000 people with all those scientists and engineers doing marvelous things. That is kind of a history of what we really did without going through all of the many products that will be found or you can find out about in the book. So that's a brief history which should not be lost, because I say it is a national treasure, and we're now all gone because General Motors decided in the late 70s to dismember us and sell us in pieces. And it's very unfortunate because we've lost our name and maybe the history. So hopefully, though, the building here, the artifacts we talked about earlier, and its written history in the book will preserve some of this for the future. Why does it need to be preserved? We think still that we were unique in terms of motivating creative skill, creative things, inventive things, breaking the boundaries. There are very few companies today that can function like that. There are a few. We've moved from the aerospace age to the information age. We went through the communication age and all those age names. The problem is, I think, that we're not inspiring our young children to become interested in science and technology. That is always the path to the future. And unfortunately, other nations are not doing that. They are seeing that that's where the future is, and many of their children are eager to participate in science and engineering. We are losing those skills because that self-interest is not re-embodied in future generations. So we hope these history things that I've just mentioned will inspire people to, hey, get those kids to start thinking this way. We all need it.
Thank you, Ken, for helping to make Hughes Aircraft a national treasure and preserving its history to inspire future generations.
Indeed, it was a privilege. I was very, very fortunate to be able to be a part of this company, and it should not be forgotten, not just to inspire the future, but as a tribute to these people that work together so hard to make all these wonderful things happen. That is another thing that should not be forgotten, teamwork. We could not have done anything without the teamwork of so many devoted people. We had lots of good inventors, but once again, teamwork is what counts, and that's what made us great. That should not be forgotten.
I'm here with Tom Carvey. And what was your role at Hughes, and when did you work there?
Well, it started in 1948 when I got out of the Navy and all, and in those days it was starting off with guided missiles. And we were trying to protect bombers from other attacks with guided missiles. And it ultimately developed, of course, and went from there into all kinds of electronic and space systems activities.
I understand you're one of the first residents of this building. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yes, this was known as the cargo building because of the big airplane, the cargo liner, and it's all wood. So when they told us we were going to be stationed here, we were the propulsion department, so they could put us out here away from the electronics. But we first decided we needed fire escapes, and we had to, the offices were all internal, they had no windows. It was completely dark on the inside if the electricity failed. So we ended up having to build steps, escape steps on the outside of the building, and to put in emergency lighting and things of that sort. And of course, we ultimately occupied the building for many years in that regard.
Can you share one of your memories here at Hughes Aircraft?
Well, I think of one here in this building, this cargo building, early on when I was just a kid engineer, of watching Howard Hughes himself taxi an airplane in and out of the building. In those days, it was unusual for commercial airliners to have reversible pitch propellers, because the idea was that if anything could go wrong, it would ultimately go wrong. But Howard Hughes, I think, felt that that was going to be an asset. And he took a Convair 240 out here in the hangar and spent the entire day. First, he would taxi it out of the hangar, then he would reverse the pitch of the propeller so it would reverse, and he could back the airplane back into the hangar. And he had his sandwiches and milk up in the cockpit with him. And, that was a fun thing to be able to witness.
Could you share with us how Hughes Aircraft got into the space industry?
Well, it wasn't easy. We had to compete against, the best that there was in the world. And the most significant program that we competed for was the Surveyor program, the one that made it possible to soft land a vehicle on the surface of the moon. In those days, we didn't know whether you could do that or not, whether the moon was covered with dust and you'd sink into it or what. So no one had ever soft landed any vehicle on the moon. So this was an enormous program with NASA that we won, and with the help of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory that managed it, we successfully landed 5 of these spacecraft on the moon. Very sophisticated, obviously, in all respects, with the electronics, the power systems, the rocket motors that landed it, and all, and plus the instruments then that showed what the surface of the moon was like and would prepare the way for the Apollo program.
What made Hughes Aircraft a very special place to work?
There was enormous sense, I think, of team effort, that people worked together, and it took so many different technical disciplines to succeed in many elements of what we were doing. Very complex, very challenging, forefront of technology and all that. But I think one of the absolutely key elements in Hughes was a sense that if a problem occurred, you fix the problem, not the blame. And that meant that if a problem occurred, you were free to talk about it. You could work the solutions. You could call upon people throughout this company, which had incredible resources technically, to be able to proceed to the next step. And that ability to deal with problems, not bury them, not cover them up, face them forthrightly, get on with it, solve the problem, and then create something better next.
Is there something you'd like to add?
There were so many different technical disciplines going on at Hughes, whether in the missile business or the space and communications business, the ground systems, radars. It was incredible, the variety of elements and of the technology that was taking place. So that it was incredibly stimulating at all times. I do think that there was one thing, again unique, in the sense of integrity of the company. That if we had a problem, we would deal with it, we would take the responsibility for it, and we would go forward from there. And so the technical excellence was one thing, but the ability to apply it with integrity and responsibility was a key element to everything I ever knew and existed and learned and lived with at Hughes.
Thank you, Tom, for sharing your memories of Hughes Aircraft. I'm here with Warren Matthews. And what was your role at Hughes Aircraft, and what years did you work there?
I came to California in 1949 on leave of absence from Bell Telephone Laboratories, where I was involved in research work. And I came to go to Caltech. I saw an advertisement on the bulletin board at Caltech for the Howard Hughes Doctoral Fellowship. So I invested in a postcard and I got the fellowship. I was in the second class of that program. I went to work immediately for the Theory and Analysis section of the Guided Missile Division. It wasn't a division then, but that group, doing advanced mathematics. And then as time went on, I got involved in writing proposals, and I became a section head. What that really meant was you got a parking place, and gradually moved up and around the company.
Warren, can you talk a little bit about Hughes culture?
Well, the Hughes Aircraft Company, as we know it, the electronics company, got started at a very unique time and in the shadow of a very unique person, and led to the culture of the company. After World War II, Howard Hughes had a few buildings, some equipment, a few employees, but had never had a production contract in the military area. He hired General Aker, who was commander of the 8th Air Force in England and Europe, to be a consultant to him and advise him what to do. And General Aker patted around the Pentagon and elsewhere and came back and said, "Howard, electronics is a thing of the future." So Howard went to Dave Evans, who was head of his radio department, and said, "Dave, go, go, go." And Dave went. And between Dave and Howard, they hired Cy Ramo, who had been the head of the GE research laboratories. And Cy Ramo immediately brought along his PhD classmate, Dean Wooldridge, who was a VP of Bell Laboratories. And they set about to build an electronics company in the middle of what had been a period, an aircraft company. Cy and Dean adopted very, very quickly a fundamental strategy. And their strategy was to hire an almost unlimited number of highly trained PhD, etc. type people and build the Bell Laboratories of the West. As a matter of fact, there was an apocryphal story of the Bell Labs recruiter that came out to California and got hired by Hughes. Cy was intimately connected with Caltech and recruited a lot of people at the Caltech campus. Wooldridge had a wide variety of connections in the research area himself. And so that's the kind of people that they naturally drew on. Now, at the end of World War II, there were a whole bunch of technologies that were evidently going to be important in the military business, but that were still almost still in the research area. The radar, the guided missile, the jet aircraft. The transistor was invented in 1949, right around that time. So there's a whole bunch of technologies that needed to be developed. But as I say, we're still pretty much in their research area. And so this concept of developing the Bell Labs of the West was aimed at realizing the fruits of that approach. Now, we had the invaluable environment of Howard Hughes, who liked to do big things, liked to see big things done, and had limitless amounts of money. So Cy and Dean, in building up the early Hughes Aircraft Company, were able to do anything they wanted to with almost limitless capital supporting them, and no need to worry about making profit. Just go do it. And that led to the development of a company whose personality was that of a research laboratories. Now, very early on, the company formed a radar division and a missile division and a research laboratories, which eventually moved up to Malibu. But even though we had a research labs as a part of the company, the personality of the company was always that of a research lab. And this led to a result of the personality that the Hughes Aircraft Company concentrated on doing difficult things, things that only they, if even they, could do. And the necessity to make profit was essentially non-existent. Now, we did indeed have to make a profit to stay alive, but unlike all the rest of industry, profit was not the primary motivation. The primary motivation was solving extremely difficult technical problems. And that's been the personality of the company ever since.
Did you have any interactions with Howard Hughes personally?
Not what you would call an interaction. I saw him 3 or 4 times. I never actually spoke with him, and he didn't come around the aircraft company much after, I don't know, 53 or thereabouts. So, as I say, I saw him a few times, but didn't. And I wasn't alone. Pat Hyland, as general manager, said that there was a period of 5 years during which he had 0 personal contact with Howard Hughes, by telephone, by fax, by carrier pigeon, any other way. He had no connection with the guy. Howard had given Pat really just 3 instructions. You can't change the name of the company. You can't buy real estate without my approval. And everything is painted green and it's going to stay green. You can't change the color. And from there on, it was up to Pat. Going back to the question of personality of the company, that left us in the position of a bunch of technical people running the company for our own enjoyment, whatever we consider that to be, and with limitless capital behind us.
Were you involved with the H-4 Hercules, otherwise known as the Flying Boat, and Spruce Goose?
No, I was not involved with either one. But of course I was aware of them because they were happening right at this property. Remember that, well, not remember, I didn't tell you. When Howard and Dave Evans set out to build an electronics company, and they hired Cy and Dean, I guess it was in 1954 that Cy and Dean recognized that Howard was never going to take the company public, and therefore the best they could hope for was nice big salaries, but no equity participation. So they left the company, formed their own little Raymond Woolridge Corporation in the back of a barber shop in Westchester, got financial backing from Thompson Products. That led to TRW, which went on to do other big things. Now, when they left, there was a real possibility, the Air Force thought there was a real possibility that the company would collapse because it had been built so strongly on the personality of those 2 men. And so they were worried. But being military, they know how to fight battles. And so they issued I can't think of the word, but anyway, they came to Howard and said, Howard, we'll leave our contracts with you on the condition that you somehow separate this electronics business from your personal interests, that you separate it from your own pocketbook. Howard, being a brilliant guy, knew that the Air Force had a very weak position to stand on, but that didn't bother. He came up with a very neat answer. He formed the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, a nonprofit trust. He donated the electronics portion of the company to the nonprofit trust. That provided the installation that the Air Force wanted and solved that problem. And he also, because the electronics part had achieved such an intimate relationship with the words Hughes Aircraft Company, he let the word Hughes Aircraft Company go with the electronics part. So the electronics part didn't and never had any involvement with airplanes. We built stuff for airplanes, but we weren't in the airplane business. He renamed the aircraft business Summa Corporation. And so when you ask my involvement in the H-4 and the Spruce Goose, none, because it was a different company. On the other hand, because of the association with Hughes and the fact it was all taking place at this location, I certainly had plenty of recognition and involvement of them. We could hear the helicopter thump, thump, thump as the thing went around with a very slow bit. And there was one time when a whole group of us from Hughes Aircraft got invited down to Long Beach to tour through the flying boat. So I had a lot of interest but no involvement. You ask about my reaction to the name Spruce Goose. I think it's neat from an advertising point of view. Hughes hated it, but so what?
Could you share with us how the organization developed?
Yeah, well, with the high density of highly capable technical people, the organization developed not so much top-down as simply a basis for implementing things that got invented. The initial focus of the company was guided missiles and the fire control systems for them in military aircraft and fighter aircraft. But one of the things that the radars needed was a particular kind of semiconductor known as the gold bond diode. And we had such a spectrum, total spectrum of technical competence, anything we needed, but the company endeavored to do. And so the company developed the diodes that the radar needed, and that led to the formation of a semiconductor division. I think it was in the research labs, Nick Begovich was working on frequency scan radar, scanning the radar by frequency change as opposed to physically rotating the antenna. And that proceeded well and led to the formation of the ground systems group. So Harold Rosen was working in the radar division, or whatever it was called at the time. And he and Don Williams, who worked for me, got the idea of a synchronous satellite at an altitude such that its rotation around the Earth would be exactly 24 hours. And they were working over in a corner of the radar organization, and they concluded that they had enough going here that the company really ought to back it. And that was the formation of the space systems. So the point I'm making is that the structural development of the company followed the sequence of major inventions and technical improvements made by people in the company. And we had a total spectrum of capability so that anything you wanted, you could find in the company. Now, that we weren't unwilling to buy from the outside, we just didn't have to.
Thank you, Warren, for sharing your stories. I'm here with Wayne Ratkovich. You're preserving the history here of Hughes Aircraft. I want to thank you for doing that. Can you talk a little bit about what it's taken to get to this point and what you have in mind to carry it on from here?
Just a few months ago, we acquired 11 buildings that were formerly occupied by Hughes Aircraft Company. They're located on about 28 acres of very valuable land in Playa Vista. And we're excited to have the opportunity to do that because of the legacy of the Hughes Aircraft Company and because of the uniqueness, particularly of the big hangar, as it's commonly known these days, the Goose. It's a magnificent building. But what really is, I think, important here, not only important historically, but important for the future, is in fact the history that has taken place within these buildings. And it is a very rich history, as anyone associated with Hughes Aircraft Company knows. And we intend to pass the characteristics of that history on to the future occupants of these 11 buildings. We expect the kinds of companies that will be in these buildings in the future to be quite different, but nonetheless, they'll have a common bond with the Hughes people, a common bond being their inventiveness, their creativity, their imagination, their daring, their determination. Those are the kinds of things that make great progress in life. And we expect the companies that come here are going to be inspired by what's taken place before them, as we are. And we expect to see a great success, a new life for the buildings, different than the former life, but a new and exciting one.
Thank you, Wayne, for giving these buildings new life. Thank you for joining Peninsula Seniors Out and About. I'm Betty Wheaton. I'll see you next time.